soon. So we almost through.
Okay.
That's just a little bit more, but there's a little bit more. And I'll give you a house back.
Okay, that's fine.
All right. Okay. This particular aspect for us, for almost all African Americans and Africans in the diaspora, is the part that we can't really understand. It is the most confusing of all, to know that we were people who could build pyramids, who had spiritual forces in terms of communicate with plants and trees, and just that whole, to say that someone almost barbaric came in and was able to bring us down. A lot of people ask, well, did we do anything? We must have done something amongst ourselves or to ourselves. How could we have brought this on ourselves? I mean, was it sin? Was it payback? I mean, it kind of baffles the mind. And people look for all kinds of reasons for our downfall. That maybe we were internally corrupt. I mean, maybe we did it to ourselves first and then continued the process of something. What has your spiritual insight shown you?
Well, if someone is out there who would say that we did it to ourselves and they come
Well,
in
you know, white folks always say we did it to ourselves. As a matter of fact, they just said that we sold each other to slavery. But I mean, I want an insightful answer.
That is a good excuse for those who don't really know about the Africans, for those who don't know our history. That is a good panacea of actually extricating those who destroy us, extricating themselves from the blame.
Mm-hmm.
We did not do anything wrong to ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Africa is destroyed today, and it's continued to be destroyed today because we love other people. We are destroyed today because we profess profound, unconditional love for other people. Africa is destroyed today because we open our hearts and our minds and our hands to other people. We did not do anything. If you look at Africa, do they really look like a cursed people? No. No. We don't look like a cursed people. We look like people who have given civilizations to the world. We look at people who have given physics, chemistry, geometry, all the sciences to the world. We look at people who have given birth of the deity to the world. Let me say this. I think Africans today are so afraid that they don't have the mind that they can born Jesus. That they do not have the mind that they can be Pope. That they do not have the mind that they once lived in the realm of God. My father once said to me that if you meet a nigger in the street or in the bush or on the road and he gives you a pants, be careful. Be very, very careful that that naked man is giving you a trousseau to wear when he doesn't have a trousseau on. You see, Africans, we were not careful. When the European came and they wanted to give us a corrupt religion, even today they continue to give it to us. Consciously, they are corrupt. Look at capitalism. Where did it come from? We have barter trade. We exchange goods in Africa. My house was your house. Ain't that what the Bible says? My cattle, if you wanted it, there was no cash money. We exchange goods. They call it barter, trading. did not look at pounds.
Mm-hmm.
We look at a whole. I could give you a chicken for the goat, a cow for the mule. We didn't look at the size.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So how can a vibrant people, a conscious people, be a cursed people?
Mm-hmm.
Now, if anybody out there who believe that African are cursed, why isn't African are doing the destruction today of the world?
But every time you cut on television, you will see fighting in Africa, Rwanda, where almost 2 million people, Africans, kill each other. Even your own country, Liberia, all over Africa. When we look at TV, and this is what confuses African Americans and other people, they see destruction of Africans by Africans. They never see the hand motivating the destruction.
Well, that's why we African also have problems. We are saying our brothers and sisters, they have all the resources, most of the resources available to them in terms of writing. Some of the books and stuff that we have here today are not available in Africa. They are reading, they have read, and they are compared our system. We see comparative religion, we see comparative literature and all that kind of stuff. Don't we see that here? And if that is the case, why they can pick up some of the truth that made Africa what it has been? So that question is posed to both Africans and African American. Now, you cannot know Africa through the lenses and the images that are coming through television. That's sad.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know how many white missionaries we had in Africa? Let me tell you personally, from a personal standpoint. When I was in Africa, I only saw white Europeans. Why? And I said, why? Are our own people so afraid to go and see that continent? When I was told there were 30 million blacks in America, I could not believe it. Now, if the white Europeans can go back and become a missionary, live on that continent, exploit all the diamonds and gold, the people live like kings, kings and queens.
That's true.
What our people can go back? And I tell you this, we have to put them on our back and told the white Europeans, where are our black brothers and sisters? Is it fear? Jesus, 2,000 years ago, walked the jungles. Why are they afraid?
Jesus walked the jungles.
He walked the jungles of Africa. What do you think? Egypt was always a street. Even David that we're talking about, who was the grandparents of Jesus, he came from Ethiopia, Abyssinia. These people walk the jungles. And what they call jungle actually is God's handwriting, nature. All your medicine, your penicillin and everything, they are coming from the tree. We have an affinity with the environment. So what are we afraid? To answer your question, we cannot know Africa by those images that are coming through the lenses of the camera. That's sad. It is sad. And I think we should be tired of ourselves allowing people to fool us every day and lie to us every day. We fool ourselves when we allow people to write our history. We fool ourselves when we allow people to give us names. Recently there was a movie that came on, the Amos.
Right, absolutely, yeah.
Now, the gentleman who turned around the ship, he came from Sierra Leone. His name is Sengbe. But they gave him different name. He graduated from the Poor Society. It was through the consciousness. He learned where the sun rises and where the sun falls, and the directions of the waves and the energies. of the sun gravity, he was able to turn the ship around with no compass to go back to where he came from. Now, we have explained these things over and over and over and over again, but there is something in the minds in the West that people are afraid to do away with some of the lies that Christianity has used to destroy the minds of the African. We are not cursed. Blackness is a blessing. Now, let me bring in genetic and explain a few things to you about human color. The gene, there are 4 genes responsible for the coloration of human being. Cut it off.
Dealing with what you're talking about.
Okay. We were on genetic.
Yes, very important.
Genetic, when we talk about the gene, pigmentation or middling, we are talking about coloration. And there are 4. If you look at Davenport, it's one of the profound writers that I have seen on the colorations of humanity or the pigmentation. Davenport. Those genes, they name them A, B, C, and D. During the process of the formations of the human being in the womb, we know that the gene carry genetic information.
Correct.
And they begin to write. They begin to write. If all the 4 genes register their ink, and I'm going to make it very simple so the least person can understand, that's why I don't want to make it very difficult. You will find that the full completion of the color black will evolve, will come into reality, will be seen, will be complete, will be perfect. They are called Lucy, L-O-C-I, in a plural form, Lucy. Okay. When 4 of them are working, errorless.
Errorless.
Yes, errorless.
When they're perfect.
When they are perfect. Okay. What is the point? What is the point? Now here, God gave 4 genes. They're supposed to do their work. They are all working. The registrar, the ink, and you have a beautiful sun-tinted skin like me, or like all other Africans in the diaspora. If there is a deficiency in one of those genes, you have what?
A diminution of darkness.
A diminution of darkness. What does that tell you?
It tells me as it is defected, the more defect, the lighter it gets.
That's correct. The more defected, the more lighter it becomes. So then how can blackness...
Explain that one more time, because I understand what you're saying. There are 4 gene codes.
Yes, codes.
And these codes we are looking at as strip.
That's correct, strips, yeah.
And when the strips are perfectly laid down,
that's correct,
you get a black man.
Yes.
If there's any imperfection, you get not so black.
That's correct. So what we're talking about when we say coloration, we are talking about strictly code dominance. Now, the color that you are seeing today, what we call black color, it protects us from the rays of the sun.
Correct.
That's why in black people you don't see a lot of skin cancer.
Right.
Now, how can a cursed people be like that? We are not cursed.
That's correct.
Another point I want to bring out is that there is something called photosynthesis. That means that those who live in the cold regions of the world, they don't use too much of their vitamin. They use too much of their vitamin rather because of the cold weather.
Yeah.
In Africa, we don't. What I'm trying to drive at is that the color of Jesus or color should never have been used at all in preaching Jesus to the Africans. What makes people spiritual? What makes somebody superior is not color. It is what?
Their transformation mentally.
The transformation mentally. The spiritual mind. What you do to your fellow man. The good that you do. How you treat people. The love you have for people. What you share with people. Look. Jesus that we're talking about today. Don't you think he had a mind to have exploited his followers? Do you know how many disciples he had in Italy or in Rome? Have any reverend told you that? They don't even touch that.
No, he didn't have too many disciples in Italy and Rome.
Okay, but what I'm saying is that if his desire was to accumulate wealth, he would have exploited them.
Yeah.
He had no bank account. He had one pair of shoes, maybe, and a clothing. And he became what? Itinerary preacher. Look at the way he lived with the poor, those who didn't have. And what was his mission? To share. If he had too much, give it to your other friends. That's why he went against the paradigm of capitalism that were accumulating wealth at the expense of the peaceful people of the world.
Absolutely.
Does that tell us what? The Europeans who came, they were doing the opposite of what Jesus was teaching. So we are not a cursed people. We are blessed. There are some misinformed missionaries, anthropologists, and sociologists who said that in Africa, because we speak a lot of languages or dialects or tribes, we have so many tribes, we are cursed. And an excuse for Europeans to hide their crime that they committed against the Africans. How many tribes were there among the Hebrew? 12. The 12 tribes. Now how can the 12 tribes be among the Hebrew who were the African, they were blessed? Now today African, we got more, we are cursed. Ain't that the opposite?
That is, absolutely. Absolutely.
Look, if I were to go into sports, and what we're saying here, it has nothing to do with black supremacy. It has to do with the fact. Need all the great sports players in the world today. I can bring in just Jackie Robinson, the Muhammad Ali, the Michael Jordans. Look at musicians. Look at music. Maria Makiba, and even in America, look at the Michael Jackson, the Whitney Houston. Public speaking, breaking the Luther King, breaking Michael S. And more our contemporary speakers today. Do we look like a cursed people?
No, we do not.
To me, we are blessed. And the only way those who ill-treated or to cover their dirt, to repeat myself, is to blame the victims.
Let me ask you, why was the missionary, what role did the missionary play in the colonization of Africa? And why the missionary?
The missionary played a destructive role in the colonizations of Africa. The missionary were the worst of all. However, there were some good ones. I'm not here to talk about the good ones because the good that they were so little, they were guinea pigs. And I think I discussed that in my book.
Yes.
Some of them went there out of ignorance. They did not know what they were doing. There were 3 groups of people that went to Africa. The missionaries were the first. They went there to pacify the African. They had worked for pacification, to transform the African, to teach the African to be meek, to be kind. We were already kind. However, we were aggressive as well. If anybody came in your town to burn your house, you're not going to let him do that. You will fight back.
Right.
So the missionary were there to again show the corrupt Bible. The corrupt Bible. Because the Bible was written between 800 to 1200 by the Hebrew. And I said some Hebrew, they were African, but they were Africans, but when they wrote, it was corrupt. Corrupt. Now this is a long lecture. I don't know where we can go into that. So no, King James, and they were rewritten and rewritten and all that kind of stuff and things like that. So the part that we have today, it is corrupt. But however, the Hebrew, they did write something, and we can touch that later on. But they brought the corrupt Bible. All the pictures in there that were black were devils. All the angels in there were what? White. I still have some of the Bible right now in Liberia. You could not see a white angel in the Bible.
A white angel?
I mean, excuse me,
a black angel.
A black angel. I'm sorry, a black angel in the Bible.
Correct.
All the angels were all white. So their role was to destroy the marriage system. Now we got to marry in the church. See? You couldn't marry no more. They preached the gospel to Africa in the sense that to be born again means what? To do away with your culture.
Give some examples.
That whoever is in Christ is what? A new
creature.
A new creature. But they turn it around to say that you should put everything away and become what? A new in the culture of what? The European. So they went after the young children. They kidnapped them. They didn't come to the mission willingly. They had to kidnap some of them. They beat them. They got to beat. Some of them were big. They were hanged up in a tree and flock to learn ABC, to learn the European, the white man language, and also not to carry on the legacy of the old heads of the Griot. So, in other words, the Europeans were actually preparing the young generation in a different civilization while they were subtly killing the old generation. Now the old folks now became servant to what? To the youth. In other words, what we call elites that are in Africa today were created by the missionaries. Elitism was actually created by the missionary. They created 2 classes of people. The African elite and the indigenous elite. Then the 3rd class was themselves. They destroyed the marriage system, the heating system, we mentioned that also.
With the medicine.
With the medicine and everything. And they became negotiators of the diamond mines, of the golds. When David Livingstone went to South Africa, the so-called the first white missionary on the continent, he wanted to preach. What did he do? He forgot about the preaching and began to write articles on the indigenous people. How they were sitting among diamonds. How they were using diamond as stone to cook. And the whole place, he wrote about the beaches and the beautiful environment of the continent. He opened up a can of worms, of destructions, and they went to Africa. A missionary. Recently, Pat Robertson. Look at the work of the missionary. He flew, according to news and record, 42 airplanes to Africa as a relief, so-called relief, for those who were dying in the war. 2 of the planes carried some old clothes. The other 40 were for what? Diamonds and golds. Missionaries. Missionaries who actually, they were only flying the kite of Christianity. But they went in blue suit, business suit. They were negotiating businesses. They didn't even buy the land. People get in the land to build missions and all that kind of stuff. But they had machines. They were prospecting for the diamond, the plutonium, the gold and everything. And they were contacting businesses that were coming in the country and exploiting the mineral resources of Africa. So to answer your question, the missionary first, the merchant came, who was buying the natural resources, and then they brought what? The militaries and the guns. What one of the good researchers called the 3 MMs that came to Africa. Guns. You cannot fight guns. So the first role of the missionary was to pacify the African, to make them into a mindless, spiritualless, evil group of people. Evil because they were practicing capitalism. Evil because they were practicing individualism. Evil because they had no more affinity with the environment. That was first promoted by the missionaries. Now, on the end note, look at the Congo.
Slavery also came out.
Oh yeah, slavery came about. Slavery. But when the missionary went to Africa, they didn't carry the message of Jesus. They carried Christendom. Christendom is different from Christianity.
Yes.
Christendom was primarily for all Europeans. It had nothing to do with the African religion or the African diaspora. Europeans who baptized in that church, they are put it together, the state and everything, they became Christendom. Now, how did it happen? We know that when Jesus left, there was a vacuum.
Yes.
There was a vacuum. Honestly and respectfully,
Paul feels that.
the idea of Christ coming back was not the concept of the early Christians. Because in the I'm gonna let me make a little bit before I bring in the African.
Okay.
The idea of Christ coming back was not the early concept of the early Christians. When a vacuum was open, Paul, his first profession was pro-manna. You know what a pro-manna was supposed to do? To flush out the Christian, to go from house to house and flush the Christian for assassination, for killing. That was his first job.
That's true.
Yes.
That was Paul. He was Saul then.
Saul then. Thank you. He was Saul then. He was a tent maker. That one of his profession. But to flush out the Christian. Paul, respectfully, if he had seen Jesus, he would kill him.
Yes, he would have.
If Paul has seen, or Saul, let's say Saul at that time he was called Saul, has seen Jesus before, he would have killed him.
Absolutely.
But Paul was on his way to Damascus, and something happened to him. Every research, medical research, thank God, medical research can help also. Every indication showed that he suffered from heat stroke.
Right.
Or sun stroke, hallucination, maybe. But one side of his body lost consciousness, feeling. Paul was vulnerable. People that people don't know this. He was vulnerable. He only hoped to what? Embrace Christianity. A sick man. He had to find his way up. He squeezed the movement. Paul never saw Jesus.
Right.
He was not one of the original disciples of Jesus. In fact, he made himself the 13th disciple of Jesus.
Right.
I'm trying to explain the coming of Christendom, a belligerent religion that went to Africa.
Correct.
Now, there was after Paul, back again, after he had embraced Christianity, he said that his main principle was that if we say that Jesus Christ is not the Son of God, our faith is in vain. You listen to that statement?
Yes, right.
If.
Right.
If is a subjunctive mode. If. It not say Jesus Christ is the Son of God. He said, if we don't say that, then our faith is in vain. The early Christian worship God, monotheism, period. Even in the book of Psalms, when they asked Jesus Christ, are you the Son of God? What did Jesus Christ say?
Thou say I am.
Thou say I am. Look at the book of Psalms, kingly. Look at the kingly. He said, those who have reached the Messiah, you remember we talked about Messiah before, the coming of the angelic revelation?
Christ.
The coming of the Christ, I consider what? God in themselves, because they are operating in the divine realm of God. So when people call me God, they are talking about the Christ that came from the divine is sitting on me. But I do not call myself God. It is coming from the house mouth, the house. It is coming from the camel mouth, in the mouth of Jesus. But Paul changing it around, absolutely make Jesus a God. Now there were other gods who revived themselves, who performed miracle. Artists, A-T-T-I-S, artists, Adonis. In the Middle East. Paul's intention was to match these God doing with Jesus Christ. I had nothing against the Messiah, as I said. And I met him, he had an African origin. But to lie in his name is not right. That's not a way to embrace your own son, or your own brother, or your own sister, or even the God to lie. So Paul came because he was vulnerable. In fact, the primary disciple of Jesus, you don't hear anything about them in the book of Apostles. When Paul came, everything switched.
That's right. From Peter.
Paul became what? The hero.
Yes.
Do you know that Jesus had brothers?
Yes.
James. What happened to John? What happened to all the other people that were working with Jesus, who were the primary disciple of Jesus? We can't hear about any of them. Paul came on the scene.
Who?
Okay. Now,
Azina? Just one.
something miraculous or destructive happened. What? Who is that, Azina?
Yes.
She wants to speak to Azina.
No. Don't worry. Azina not here.
She's not here.
When the phone ring, don't.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Um,
The real keeper of the law was Stephen. Do you know why Stephen was stoned? Who killed Stephen?
Yeah.
Paul.
Paul. Yes.
The death of Stephen was approved by Paul. Now here is a man who said he was on his way to Damascus, that Jesus Christ had spoke to him. He had changed. He heard the voice came from somewhere and said, Paul, Paul,
Why persecute?
why persecute me?
Yeah.
Then he turned around and came and caused the death of who? Stephen. The stoning of Stephen.
You're all right.
In fact, why would he drag? You see, they are not printing or writing the true story of Paul coming to take over Christianity.
That was his mission.
They are not
He
writing
fell
the
one
truth.
way, he did it another way.
He did it another
internally.
way. Internally. They dragged him out of the temple. In fact, the first disciple, they did not want to have anything to do with Paul.
That's correct.
They resisted. But the brother of James wanted peace in the community. So he embraced Paul. They did not want Paul.
That's right.
Paul even make it more difficult when he wrote. He didn't write. When he plagiarized the epistle, no book existed a long time ago. In that epistle, he make it so difficult. If you call yourself prophet, look at that. So gentlemen, if you call yourself prophet, you accept my words not as a word of men, but as a word of what?
God.
Listen to English. I was not trained in America. I don't have a degree in English. But listen to what the man is saying. So if you didn't accept a word, you are not a prophet. And why people succumb to Paul? Because the man killed. He killed in the thousands and thousands of Christians. So people were afraid of him. When he went and he said he had changed, the disciples said, no, this can't be this man.
That's correct.
This can be the Paul that we knew. Christendom. Now, what I don't want you to forget, I'm outlining the destruction, the killing, the taking over of things. And I'm going to link that to Christendom.
Correct.
And the linking is what I'm doing right now. The book, the apostle, is so corrupt. It was written for the Greek. Luke wrote that book for the Greek. Now, it was not intended for the Africans.
That is correct.
Paul was one of those that Jesus' message was even against. People forget to know that his parents were rich. Got a lot of money. A lot of people forget to know that. They were rich. They were not giving back to the people. They were taking money from the people. You see why the destructions were going on. Destruction was going on. When Paul came, remember Jesus died 33 in the common era. Paul died 65. Or he came on the scene, it was like almost 35 years. 30, his teaching and all that kind of stuff. They never met. But when Paul came, he became the whole hero of the teaching of Jesus and left for a whole generation of people who have been preaching the true Christian. Even Peter, who was with Paul, who was the real lawyer, he stood in his face. Christendom. The purpose of Christendom was to destroy. It was not the mercy that we're talking about. So Paul brought that same iron hand and conquered a group of people for his own personal gain and promotion. That is Christendom. Destroying people. Christianity is different. We talked about it earlier. Love in the community. We said that the church was a community of people. They did everything together. They worked together. They pray together. All year round, day round. You name it, all together. The coming of Christendom was something different. The destruction of our value, the attack, it was what the Pope promoted. When Paul left, it was another vacuum in the church. The papacy. The Christians believed that Paul and Peter died in Rome. Therefore, that particular area would have been what? The seat of what? Management. The seat of what? Supervision. The seat of what? Government. So then the Pope, you know, they were trained in secular law and religion as well.
Right.
So they begin to what? Settle dispute. Okay? Godgrade and all the other peoples, and they begin to write Clements, wrote letters, setting dispute here and there, here and there. As time went gradually and gradually and gradually, the Pope or the papacy were created. They became what? The authority of the church. They had nothing to do with Jesus. They did not know Jesus. They did not know Christianity. In fact, they were worshiping sun gods.
So they are the true Antichrist.
That's correct. That's correct. And the true Antichrist. Now, who killed Jesus? Let's be realistic. Do you know any name in Africa by Herod? No. Pilate? No. Who were all the people who joined the Messiah and killed him? That meant death occurred in Rome. The African has nothing to do with the death of Jesus Christ. And any African man or woman out there should be annoyed when anybody tries to blame the death of Jesus Christ on the African. We should be annoyed. His death. They're the ones supposed to be, we have to be baptizing them. Baptism supposed to be done by the Africans. Told the European to cleanse them of their what?
Sins.
Their sins. For the destructions of the message and the life of the Messiah. Didn't want, had the money, the resources and everything that Christ was preaching against.
That is right. And they were oppressing.
Oppressing,
the
that's
African
correct.
at the time.
So in essence, if we are cursed people, why is it that we are not doing all the evil stuff? Even the man who helped Jesus to carry his cross, he came from Libya. Cyrene. An African. We have been involved in the birth of Jesus, and even in trying to rescue Jesus. We have been involved. His mother, we know that he got a descendant in Africa. Even in his healing process when he was taking down the cross.
His mother?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Was
Yeah. They would say Palestine or Middle East and all that kind of stuff. The whole region. Again, we go back to the old map. Okay. They were all considered Africa. Okay.
All right. I guess we can give you back your house.
Another aspect of Christendom is that when it landed in Africa, it attacked our marriage system. Now, let me take you to the Old Testament. In that Testament, we learn that Africans were blessed, will be blessed with many children. Let me make it simple.
Yes.
That your children will be so much more than
The grains of the sand.
the grain of the sands.
Yes.
Listen to that very carefully. Procreation was very, very important. there is an important scenario that happened in the Bible. Onah. Onah brother's wife could not have a child.
Right.
So, in that culture, if your brother dies, you have to take over his wife, take care of the children, so the children could grow in a very efficacious, efficient, good, nurturing family. Onah, when he slept with his brother's wife, instead of coming into her for her to get pregnant, he spilled the sperm. For that reason, Onah was killed. What does that tell you? It says, or it means, that every sexual interaction or intercourse should result into what?
A child.
A child. A lot of people condemn polygamy. And let me just link this to polygamy. If it has not been the rate of the Africans, you and I will not be sitting here. You will not even be interviewing me today.
That's correct.
We survived slavery because of what? Our number. Like the grain of sand. More than, some people say 10 million. But more than 50. Who knows? Even more than 100 million Africans may have been executed. I'm using the word execution.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. More than that. Now, what happened to the Tianos in Puerto Rico? Because their generation was less, they were not too much in number, they were all decimated. Let's go to Australia among the Aborigines. When the European came, they decimated them, shot them as sports animals. What happened to the Indian? There were more than 350 tribes in North America, in the New World. Now, go out there and count. How many you have? We survived slavery because of our birth rate. It is a blessing. When Christendom landed in Africa, they attack our birth rate. They attack our marriage system. And what you see on the continent today is the continued destructions of the whole old slavery. It's like an old one that is in what? A new battle. That's what is going on today. Most of the experimental drugs in Africa are being tested on the Africans.
Correct.
Even the attack on our marriage system is done in a way that if we continue to practice polygamy, diseases and all other viruses are being used to destroy and to decimate the African culture right now. Food, all the expired foods in Europe are transported in Africa. Tablets, you name it. Canned goods are being transported. So there is a deliberate, intentional plan for the destruction of the whole African continent and its people. When that is done, they will conquer the whole African mind and minds. Another point that I want to touch on is that the issue of Christendom using a tricky system, which is, let's call it a little bit. Okay. The tricky thing was that they attack, as we said earlier, the belief system. And what that does to the person is to totally demolish, destroy, and demise the individual essence. But the tricky thing that I wanted to talk about is the language, the mother tongue. The mother tongue is so powerful. The language. is the essence, is a communication process between the individual and that person's God. It is the language, it's a tool that they use to express the ordinary experience and the visions, and to carry the blueprints of the culture, the music, the songs, the heating system, the names of the herbs, of the animals, everything that make that society holistic comes in the language. And so they brought the official language with them, which were some part of Africa English, some part French, other part Portuguese and Spanish and so forth, and German and things like that. None of them brought us civilization. No colonists, no missionary. But even among ourselves, the problem we're having right now in Africa is to convince ourselves that Europeans do not bring anything called civilization. They bring their own ways of life and call it a civilization. But people fail to ask the question, by whose standard? Whose standard is this civilization? So the whole trick that I'm talking about, the elitism creations, we saw the language, the new language coming in, and they are saying that the African language or languages do not have alphabets. That's not true. They didn't give it a chance to nurture. In fact, it was not the goal of the African. If it has been the goal of the African, eventually every culture evolved and we have been able to go to the divine to come up with alphabet and write today. But that was not the goal. The concept, as we said, oral communication, the ability to remember knowledge, information, to be able to retrieve it anytime, anywhere, any moment. That was the trick. So Christendom was not the message of Jesus Christ. The Christ that they brought in Africa was the Christ of destruction, and today it has silenced the intellectual, the spiritual ability of the African. And until Africans realize our potential from God, our role in the world, what we have done, our spiritual purpose, and go back to the original belief system of our people, we are done. And I want to make this clear, crystal clear. If Africa dies, the whole world dies with Africa. If there's any group of people out there who believe that they're going to destroy Africa, remember, our gene is in the world today. Remember, our language made the world today. Remember, our civilization, geometry, chemistry, physics. We bred love. All the concept, that's why I said from the beginning, the African concept gave the world minds, eye, ear, nose, and mouth. If they are going to go to destroy the environment, the river, and everything, and they think that non-African going to live, it is an error. When African dies, the world dies. And I want to end on that note if you don't have any questions.
I have one other question, because I'm glad my church, we do a thing now called, would you talk to us in terms of the importance of recognize our ancestors and dealing with them from that perspective of what we're doing.
The recognitions of our ancestors as Africans is very important, and it cannot be overlooked. If you do not know where you're coming from, you can't know where you're going. And in order for you to know where you're going, first of all, you got to know where you're coming from. And so, in the African diaspora, or in Africa itself, before we do anything, we must. We must. It's no excuse. Give thanks and appreciations or recognize the ancestor. We do that because they are the footprints upon which our footprints walk. They are the cradle upon which we walk. All the information that is in us, the wisdom that we have, the nurturing, all come from the ancestor. Our ancestor do not leave us. They are our mediums. Yes. The ancestors are mediums. They watch over us what we do. Even the divine is up there with the ultimate power. But in the physical world, right here, called the earth, and into the infinite, into the God infinite, right in between, our ancestor, they are the first person we speak to. They comfort us. When we are sick, when an African person who is really in tune with their culture and an environment, is something was on their mind, craving them, they go to sleep. They see the ancestor advising them what to do. So recognizing that as ancestor in whatever you do is very, very important. But today, in the modern world, we have deviated. They have no more role to play in our life. We are now one. By ourselves, we are not individual. We put our trust in the counselor now. We put our trust in some individual. We have lost that power, that ordinary power, that spiritual transformation through which we go, and we have that interaction with our ancestor. It is cut off, and people are now floating, and looking for a way. They have lost that key to the impersonal God that first you must recognize. And in that recognition, it is your people. It is an environment. Those who are gone before you. All of them working together to give you that power. That's why when we name our children, before we name them after great men and women to carry on their legacy. Was he a good hunter? A good medicine man? A good healer? A good musician? So we name our children after them as another means or ways of recognizing our ancestor. Even when we eat food, we are doing it spiritually. If you take out grains of food or rice and say, this for my ancestor, we are not saying that the ghost is coming to take spoon and eat it. But we are linked to these ancestors spiritually. They can bring message. Most of the biblical people that have existed, they resolve most of their problem through what? Dreams and visions. That's why it's very, very important. The spirituality or the spiritualness to that is that God is not a cash God. C-A-S-H. God is not a material God. You cannot acknowledge the God because you got a car. You cannot recognize the God through synthetic and physical world. You got to recognize that God in the invisible. And it is in that invisible world exists our ancestor as mediums, as comforter, as people who are always around us, looking up for us, interacting. Because the concept of died and gone does not exist, and left is a continual cycle. It's a cycle. It goes on and on, on and on, on and on. That's why when the ancestors, before they die, they know some of them who is actually entrenched and engrossed into our system. They know when they are dying. They will call all the children and leave them with the last words. And say, my son, I'm not going. I will always be with you. I will come on back to you. When they say I'm going to come back to you, you're going to reborn then. When we talk about reincarnation, the reincarnation of Jesus Christ, right there in the African ancestral system. When they say I'm coming back to you, death doesn't exist. Death is left, left is death. African ancestral system. See? So, we cannot forget these things. What I've been taught today, we had it a long time ago. It has made us good people. We have to continue to do it. Recognize those who have come before us. Teach our children. We should not forget their names, what they have done. Even if people have problem pronouncing their names, it should be their problem because they are not intelligent. That's how I can put it. You can say Jehoshaphat, and you can say Johnson or Fejero, Eisenhower. What is the problem to call Opoku? How Somah? It's so simple. So we have to continue this pattern. The recognition. It is vibrant application of the total survival of the African people. We all know ourselves, we do not exist as a people.
Thank you. Thank you so very much.
Good.
My brother, I shall be with this. You have been more than generous with us, and I can't